Hi friends, today we're going to talk about trends. But do you know how trends actually emerge? They start at a few key design exhibitions around the world. So make sure to watch this video. Even I discovered a lot of new things. Let's start with color trends. Wood is super popular, especially black wood. Deep, rich, solid black wood. But it's not just about using black wood. The key is how it's paired with shape and form. For example, angular wooden pieces are a big trend. Large angular furniture, angular shelves, angular dressers, basically all kinds of furniture made from traditional wood but given a unique geometric shape. Speaking of color, red is definitely popular but not bright red. It's more of a deep, complex shade, sometimes even burgundy, and it works great as an accent. This deep red is often used to highlight a specific chair or stool, kind of like a way to show who's in charge in the house. Here's an example of a throne-like chair and how red is used. In a workspace, for instance, when you walk in, there's usually a large, commanding chair. So even if the chairs have the same shape, the color makes it clear which one is the main chair. Another thing about colors, there's a huge variety of them. If we compare it to the traditional interior design rules we're used to, the Chinese exhibition takes things to a whole new level. There are tons of different elements and colors that all work together, and even though there are a lot of them, the overall look still feels balanced. But here's the catch. If you're not a professional interior designer or architect, and you don't have an art background, pulling off a multicolor concept like this can be really tricky. For most people just looking to furnish their home, a good rule of thumb is to stick with black and white as a base and add no more than 2 or 3 accent colors. For example, you could go for that deep red, a nice green, or natural wood tones. That way, the interior looks more balanced. But globally, the trend right now is all about variety. This is an example of constructivist elements in furniture. Quite a bold one. The sofa has a rounded shape, but its colors resemble those used in suprematist compositions, like those by Malevich. This is another example of using lots of colors. There's gold, red, green, black, and even some scattered elements on the floor. Interestingly, this combines constructivist elements and colors in modern furniture. And it's modern furniture inspired by traditional designs. Take this chair, for example. It's a traditional blackwood chair, but reinterpreted through a modern design lens. It has a slightly updated form and even features digitalization elements, which is a global trend right now. And speaking of colors, another key trend is gradients. A gradient is a smooth transition from one color to another. Typically, the lower part is darker and more massive, while the upper part fades into almost white, symbolizing the connection between earth and sky. Speaking of traditions, it's about continuing the history of these traditions, where traditional forms are added to modern functional items, such as a floor lamp or light fixture. For example, Chinese vases, which are very similar, by the way, to Russian gzhel and Russian painting. And at this exhibition, I saw a great combination of a table lamp and a Chinese vase. It's a mix of traditional antique elements with modern design. This is also a major trend that stems from several global design movements. The first is recycling, reusing items that have already been in use, preserving them instead of harming the environment. The second point is that you add history to the interior and to your home. For example, a traditional Chinese cabinet or dresser, it looks stunning, especially in a deep red shade. And if it's not a new piece but one with real history, perhaps 50 or even 100 years old, it becomes even more special. Continuing the idea of mixing tradition with modernity. One stunning light I saw was designed like a Chinese bird cage. The idea is to transform a traditional bird cage into a modern pendant light. Hung above a table, it looks absolutely amazing. The birds inside aren't wooden, they're actually real. The cage itself has this beautiful domed shape. It looks really stylish. This transformation of a traditional item into a modern design looks incredibly cool. For several years now, there's been a trend for glass furniture. In the past, plastic furniture was popular, often in bright colors. But now we're seeing real crystal and glass, materials that reflect and enhance light. This glass is used to make tables, bathrooms, and chairs, but now soft upholstery is being added to glass furniture. For example, parts of a sofa, side tables, or surfaces where you can place a cup. The combination of soft materials with crystal looks absolutely stunning. Here you can see how they combine glass legs with soft upholstery, almost wool-like in texture, a modern shape, modern textiles, but pay attention to the glass bases under the sofa at the bottom on which the cushions are placed. Sometimes a glass table even incorporates some wood to make it look more beautiful. At this exhibition, I saw an amazing table with a round-colored glass in the center. Above the table, there's a lamp with directed light, and the light passes through the colored glass, falling onto the floor and creating a beautiful orange hue. This perfectly complements the legs of the chairs that are there. The next trend, which is also related to traditions, is the antique shop. If we previously talked about the fusion of modernity and tradition, another part of interiors is a shop with history, where there is a large amount of antiques and various items. They are all balanced, they are all kept in one color. They don't create a mess because they have similar textures. They have different deep, muted shades, and it looks stunning. You step into such an interior, and you can really feel the history that just envelops you. Continuing the theme of modern shapes and blending elements, here we see traditional plants that grow in China. These are bamboo-inspired light fixtures, tall and elongated. Of course, these lights are best suited for spaces with high ceilings. The bamboo-like light extends upwards to the ceiling as a thin rod but maintains a modern shape. On the other side, there's an LED strip that reflects light off the wall, creating a diffused glow. This means the light isn't harsh on the eyes. In general, this type of lighting is very comfortable and beneficial for people. Friends, let us know in the comments what design and architecture trends you've noticed gaining popularity lately, ones you like and ones you don't. Share your thoughts in the comments. Now, let's talk about rugs. A huge amount of textiles are produced in China, and there are traditional patterns or prints inspired by traditional elements. For example, there are dragon motifs, not in a direct realistic depiction, but in a stylized graphic form. These prints can feature tigers, elephants, or other animals. Interestingly, these prints can be found on modern rugs. A modern rug shape is used, but with a traditional print, creating a look that is both contemporary and traditional at the same time. And of course, when talking about traditions, there's the Chinese neoclassical style. This style is a reinterpretation of traditional furniture from a new perspective. However, it remains luxurious, expensive, and rich in materials and textures, emphasizing the status of the interior. An example of neoclassical style: very modern shapes, bold colors, and angular elements. It looks expensive, luxurious, and monumental. Another take on neoclassical style: on one hand, it features traditional wooden elements, but the shapes are more angular and modern. It's a fusion of modernity, luxury, and tradition. Of course, friends, no exhibition is complete without some quirky Chinese designs. Now let me show you some unique trends in Chinese design. Here's an example of these fluffy designs and a kind of miniature trend where objects are shaped like animals. For instance, there are designs featuring animal heads, a Mickey Mouse head, and on the other side, a chair, a fish-shaped sofa, kind of on the edge of absurdity. The next trend I'd call cuteness, when furniture takes the shape of animals. If you're imagining something cringeworthy and tasteless, yes, that exists too, like a gorilla-shaped sofa or a dog-shaped couch. But there are also absolutely stunning designer pieces that work well in a kid's room or even a living room because they actually look stylish. All right, what do we have here? Here's a real dinosaur. A great idea for a kid's room. You can sit on it, put something on it, maybe enjoy a cocktail. Oh, look, it moves. And it's also a lamp. Amazing. Look, here's a bull, and the bull is also a stool. You can sit on it, stand on it, and yeah, see? It's really convenient, even for using your phone or setting down a laptop. Maybe you can sit on the other side too. They really love these different animal designs. These are bedside tables with small built-in lights, perfect for a kid's room. I've seen a lot of furniture pieces with upholstery that looks like a dog's bed. Really fluffy, you know? And these dog bed-inspired pieces come in all kinds of shapes. On one hand, yes, some of them are a bit cringy, but on the other, there are some really cool modern furniture and decor pieces that actually look stylish. So it moves from cringe to chic. Here's another example, these fluffy dog bed style pieces. Honestly, if you have a pet, they'll probably jump right onto this and claim it as their own spot. And of course, if we're talking about trends coming from China that influence the whole world, there's partitions. Movable partitions are very popular in China, and this trend has long since made its way into European and Western interiors. What's interesting is that while these partitions used to have a distinctly Chinese style and added Eastern elements, now they've evolved into completely new shapes. They're still inspired by traditional Chinese partitions, but now they have a more modern form. I really like these partitions here. They form two faces merging together. These partitions partitions can both divide the space and serve as wall decor. Just place them against a white wall, and it instantly becomes more visually interesting. Speaking of the exhibition, although it might not be practical at home, there was a lot of scattered material on the floor. For example, there could be gravel or leaves spread across the floor. In fact, spreading something on the floor as part of a composition could be a cool and interesting idea. It creates a certain atmosphere and can work as a decorative element. In one space, there were leaves scattered all over the floor. In another pavilion, there was some hay and even soil spread out. Yes, even some soil and decorative moss were used. All of this helped create a very specific atmosphere. How can you apply this technique in interiors, and what does it mean? It reflects a simple trend, being closer and more connected to nature. To recreate that natural vibe, you can scatter some objects thoughtfully. The key is to avoid dust and mess. So think about what kind of materials you could use. Maybe you could lay out some stones. You could also use small fabric pieces or anything else that creates a similar feeling. The goal is to make it feel like you've stepped into another world, a world that feels much closer to nature. Shelving units are usually made of black wood. This ties into that angular trend I mentioned earlier. But I saw an absolutely brilliant idea. The cool thing is that the shelving unit is circular. It works well for large spaces where there's room. It helps to zone the space and separate one part of the room from another. In the center of the circle, there's a large light fixture. The light shines out like the sun from the middle. The shelving casts stunning shadows all around. The black frame lets the light spill onto the walls beautifully. It's a very smart solution for dividing space, and it creates a super cool visual effect. Now about double-sided sofas. Before, they used to be simple rectangles with clear front and back sides, but now they're evolving into more complex shapes. Here's an example of a multi-sided sofa. You can see how these stylish women are sitting on it, chatting. The sofa itself has an irregular shape. It kind of curves like the letter U. Honestly, this sofa is amazing. You can place a decorative arrangement or floor lamps in the center, and this sofa works from multiple angles. It has an angular shape, no sharp rectangles, everything is slightly slanted. So if you put this in a rectangular room, it adds more movement and dynamism. Here's a red version, and it also showcases modularity. It's transformable. You can arrange it as a double-sided sofa or a single-sided one, adjusting it however you like. If you look closely, you'll see how the two modules connect. Not at a right angle, but in a puzzle-like way. Here's an example of a complex sofa. You can see that it's made up of different modules using different fabrics. At first glance, they seem rectangular, but in reality, the connecting sides between modules are angled differently. And whereas before, sofas had a central backrest, here we have a sofa group with different sections. One spot for one person, another for someone else. This trend comes from digitalization and social media culture, where you can relax together on the same sofa but still be in your own space, scrolling through your phone or reading a book. Low furniture is becoming really popular. This is influenced by Asian culture, but is spreading globally. Whether it's a low chair, a low-seated armchair, or a low sofa, it looks really cool. Interestingly, low furniture makes the body appear more elongated. Since your legs are slightly lifted, it creates the illusion of longer legs. Here's an example of low furniture, where people sit on mats. This is inspired by Japanese culture, where sitting on mats is common. In fact, in Japan, spaces are traditionally measured not in square feet, but in tatami units. Another global trend is the influence of Arab culture. Think desert landscapes, Bedouin-style elements, and furniture with smooth, organic shapes. It's similar to what we see in futuristic films like Dune or those desert-like settlements in Star Wars. This type of furniture, inspired by those forms and motifs, is becoming more and more popular. I've mentioned this in my video about architectural trends as well. Here, these trends overlap as the influence of the Arab world continues to grow. At the Guangzhou exhibition in China, Japanese culture has a huge influence. You can see it in various slatted furniture designs, tea ceremony setups, and more. Especially in slatted structures combined with lighting or small partitions, it all looks stunning and very intriguing. Japanese culture heavily influences Chinese culture. Despite some historical tensions, it's quite ironic because the Chinese actually love everything Japanese. Here's an example of Japanese cultural influence with more Japanese motifs. You can see the wall, which almost serves as a partition. This is an evolution of the lightbox. If the classic version was smooth, here we see elements of paper and various Japanese-style hooks. You could hang scarves and clothes on these hooks, and such a rack could also be used for hanging towels in the bathroom, for example. The next trend is something that wraps around like a form wrapped by wood, almost as if a worm is coiling around it. I've also seen some interesting, unusual lamps that look like worms standing up. This trend is noticeable, though I'm not sure I love it in all its forms. But in certain things, like when a mirror is wrapped by an angular line, I actually like this effect. Or when a sofa seat or armchair seat is wrapped by a long, stretched out shape. See this chair? The shape is like a sausage wrapping around the chair. It's an interesting trend. Here's an example of angular furniture in black wood with something wrapped around it, like this chair, which looks like a sausage, worm, or something similar. Of course, where would we be without new technologies? There was a stand where all the furniture was created with artificial intelligence. I think this is the next big trend that will only grow in the future, when programs and AI will design furniture. Designers and architects will then take these designs and bring them to life. The next trend is plush, woolen surfaces, what I call fluffy textures. These fluffy textures are actually very popular. They were featured a lot at the exhibition, with many chairs and furniture pieces incorporating these elements. You can use them for accent chairs, in living room groups, or in the bedroom. About vertical compositions. I also talked about vertical compositions in my video about architectural trends, because vertical compositions are one of the trends seen in buildings when spaces get smaller and different zones are placed on different levels. This leads to vertical zoning, and this trend of vertical items continues in interior design as well. For example, it's seen in smaller forms like floor lamps that have angular, elongated shapes. By using tall, elongated items, you can visually increase the ceiling space because vertical elements make the ceiling appear higher, especially if several are placed in a room. These are elements of vertical structure and influences from Japanese culture. Here's another example of vertical construction, and again, we have this floor lamp. By the way, I also saw works from some interesting Chinese designers who create furniture that looks like rocks or cliffs, as if you've entered a cave. These pieces have smooth, unusual, natural forms. They create very interesting, unique furniture, such as chairs, tables, and other items, and they can also work on contrast. By the way, friends, if anyone is interested in suppliers from China, feel free to DM me, and I'll send you the contact for the specific items because I've collected business cards from everyone I've shown here. If you liked something in my video, send me a message on Instagram or Telegram, and I'll send it to you. Yes, friends, I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments what you think about the trends. Remember, trends come and go, but you're the one living in your space, so do what you like and use trends as ideas that you can apply at home. And it doesn't really matter if this trend fades or not. What matters is that you like it.